this month, I have asked Anne Lister and Debbie Guneratne to come together, and there was about 30 seconds of slight shyness, which is probably about as long as I've ever seen either of you be quiet for, to be fair. And then, then there was a spark of mischief in all the eyes, and then the tongue started wagging, and the laughter started, and all of these stories started to flow backwards and forwards. So I think I'm just really, I haven't seen the final thing. I'm really excited to see what it's going to be. And everybody else, just remember, I gave these people no time, and I think you're just going to find it as exciting as I have. So enjoy, and I'm going to hand over to the pair of you.
I have seen them on the winds of morning, on rosy clouds of dawn. I've seen them fly, and I have seen them, their eyes flashing sunlight, their wings flashing firelight across the sky. Don't talk to me of reality, don't talk to me of lies. If all you heard was the clouds across the sky. And I have heard them in the silence of moonlight, in the calm of first daylight. I heard them sing, and I have heard them telling riddles and mysteries, legends and history, their voices ring. Don't talk to me of fantasy, don't talk to me of truth. If all you heard was rain upon the roof. And when I'm sitting old and grey by the fireside at home, I'll remember the beating of their wings. And walking over mountain slopes dreaming and alone, I'll hear in my head the strange sweet songs they sing. I have watched them landing on mountain slopes, sitting still as statues carved from gold. I have watched them more powerful than elements, prouder than eagles, strange and old. Don't tell me I'm imagining, don't tell me that you're right, if you have never seen a dragonfly. And when I'm sitting old and grey by the fireside at home, I'll remember the beating of their wings. Walking over mountain slopes dreaming and alone, I'll hear in my head the strange sweet songs they sing. I have met them on many a long journey, throughout a long apprenticeship to learn my skills. I have met them and recognized my family, poetry, mythology, they're living still. Don't talk to me of scientists, don't tell me that I'm wrong, if you have never heard a dragon song, if you have never heard a dragon.
Ahaganna, mama etkota kian nang katandere, magahirden kian nang hinta, hondata ahaganna. Wiva the namwalin hadinwena ektara ratika, me hiru yatan irandarean, muhuduralin sipaganna, amba theru sevenie, saman pitchamal suwanda musul, pohia sanda elie, vihidunu eliak, naga manikaya eliak. And under that full Poya moon, humans lay dreaming. They didn't realize in the Naga world a light was shining, a light of the Naga Manikaya, the Cobra stone, set in the crown of the Cobra King, the Naga King. And in that world, the night was their friend, their destiny. That world had beauty and riches beyond anything we could dream of. It had lakes floating with lotuses and swans gliding serenely. It had the smell, the perfume of tagora blossoms, white tagora blossoms, and red, ruby red winged insects flew everywhere with iridescent wings. The trees in their woods were welcoming and mysterious, with many paths leading to sacred shrines. But the most magnificent thing was that there were over 1,000 palaces, and the most ornate, the most magnificent was the palace of the Naga king. Every wall was studded with gems, sapphires, rubies, emeralds. They glittered and gleamed. In this world, everyone was happy. Everyone had what they wanted. Well, almost everyone. The Naga king had been the eldest son, and when he was the eldest son, he was called the Ruby Prince, and he had married a human princess, and together they had a daughter. They named her Mohini, and Mohini, she had dark waterfall hair, pale golden skin, and her emerald eyes, well, they were so full of promise they captivated you. And Mohini was loved by her parents, by all the Nagas, and she was cherished. As Mohini grew older, she knew she needed to marry, but she wanted a love like her parents. She wanted a love where their first glance and their first touch had meant forever. Although it wasn't an easy path, there were obstacles, especially one of a broken promise. But her mother had overcome that, and she and her father had married, and now they ruled the Naga world. Mohini told her parents she wanted such a love, and they agreed to support her. So she took to wandering through the Naga world across to the human world, and she searched, waiting, looking, wandering, until one full Poya moon night she found herself by a roadside. She could see the moon shining. She could see the paddy waving in the breeze, and the smell of tagora blossoms that always enveloped her had moved into the human world with her. And as she stood there, she heard the sound of a bell on a bullock's neck pulling a cart. She wasn't sure whether to stay or go. But then she heard the sound of a song almost at the same time as she saw the cart and the man sitting on it. And that song, it transfixed her feet. It transfixed her body. But her heart began to beat in wonder. And the Gamarala, the paddy farmer who was sitting on the cart, he was singing to himself, making his way home, looking forward to sleep. when he became aware almost of the smell, so beautiful, and he saw the shimmer of a beautiful silver sari. He saw that the sari was surrounding a voluptuous, exquisitely beautiful woman. He could see the sheen on her hair, the pale golden skin in the moonlight. And he too felt his heart beat. As he came near her, he jumped down, and Mohini looked at him and smiled. And he reached out almost unknowingly to touch her hand, and as they did, their hearts beat together, and it sounded out one word: forever. Lady, what are you doing here, so alone? Mohini smiled. I was looking for you. And the Gamarala, he couldn't believe it. This was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. He invited her to come back with him. He helped her onto the cart, and together they made their slow, meandering way back. And as they did, he took sideward glances, and he realized she was a woman of wealth, a woman of beauty. What would she want with him? Raggedy clothes, dirty feet. But when they got to the house and he helped her down, she walked inside that small, bare place. And she said, "Thank you. Your home is beautiful." And he could not believe it. Well, they began to speak. And that spoken connection went on until he finally blurted out, "Please marry me." And Mohini smiled. "Of course," she said, "I will marry you, but I ask only for one promise. You must promise never to watch me bathe." Well, it seemed such a small promise. "Of course," he said, "I promise." And they were married. She introduced him to many things, and he noticed that their house seemed to have silken curtains and beautiful cottons. He noticed that the house seemed to be growing bigger, just like her belly, and his heart. Oh, it was full of joy. He was to have a child. Life, could it be better? But with all this happiness, there was something niggling at the back of his brain, niggling all over, and he remembered his promise, and he couldn't understand. Why had she said to him never to watch her bathe? He'd seen her naked. He'd held her in his arms. Why? The next full Poya moon night, he heard her walk to the bathing room, heard the water and the singing, and before he knew it, he found his feet moving outside the house, standing next to that open window. He peered in, and as he did, he saw her naked form. He saw her step, her beautiful feet, step into that water. What was he worried about? But as her feet touched the water, he realized they were feet no longer, but a golden scaled tail. And as she stepped further and further in and sank further and further down, her body changed, became more sinuous, became shining and golden, and eventually, when her head submerged out, she came a beautiful golden cobra, a Naga princess. He couldn't help himself. And she looked at him. "Husband, you have betrayed me. You have broken your promise, and there is a price to pay. And she lunged out of the window. He found his feet moving, and he ran as fast as he could, far, far away from his house, through the paddy fields, through the woods, up and up. But all the time he could hear the slithering of that beautiful golden form following him, following him. And he ran and she followed all through the night. His feet were shredded on the stones and bleeding. And finally, as he reached that edge to the Kaluganga, the black river, he stood there, sweat dripping, feet bleeding. He looked at her. I am sorry. I failed you. I betrayed you. I am sorry. I love you. Forgive me, or do what you must. And Mohini, her emerald eyes glittered, and she looked at the man who she'd given her heart to. She looked at the man who was her future father of her child. And she hesitated. And in that moment, the sun peered over the horizon, and a single golden ray hit her form. And Mohini realized it was too late. And so she threw herself off that edge and into the river. And as he looked, he saw her golden cobra form sink beneath those black waters, taking with her their unborn child. And as the ripples died away, he was left alone in that brightening day. He walked home, his bare, poor house, and there he felt the loneliness of the silence. Every day he went to the paddy fields, and every evening he sat on that cart, moving that same path, hoping he would see her, singing the love song that he had sung that first night he met her. Thum, thay thum, thay thum, thay na na. Venaka thay num, thay num, thay na na. Ipi the ebo sat na lova vareka Pahadharakiti sil Naralova Vanayaka Lo Thularandam Sirinidi Gaye Ekula Satharak Parasita Ave Raga Sirin Bibi Min Nadayen Vedi Nagasan Mema Wanamanayadi. And they say to this day he searches for her still.
Down in the forests in Brittany, they say that if you are walking on your own, you may hear the sound of a beautiful woman or a beautiful voice singing. And as you come closer to the sound of the voice, you'll see there is a beautiful woman sitting by a pool of water. Sometimes it's described as a well, sometimes it's a pool of water. And if you get closer, she will smile at you and she will fold you in a great embrace. And as she then embraces you, she will tumble backwards into the water, taking you with her. And halfway down through the water, she will realize you can't breathe underwater. and so she'll sadly let your body fall, and she will then resurface and start to sing again. Now, I don't know whether Fulk d'Anjou knew this story, but this story that I'm about to tell you has been told of many different royal families across Europe as where they come from. But I'm going to tell it to you as I heard it from about Fulk d'Anjou. Fulk was the father of Geoffrey of Anjou, who I mentioned before, and he was therefore the grandfather to Henry II of England. So Fulk was on his way back home through the forest, and he heard the sound of a woman's voice singing. And it was so beautiful that he had to get closer to it. And as he got closer to the sound of the voice, he saw there was a pool of water, and bathing in it was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Long, beautiful blonde hair, green eyes reflecting the trees around the pond. And she was naked. And she sang. And she looked in his direction. By this time he was standing there with his mouth half open because he couldn't believe how beautiful she was, and he realized he'd fallen in love. And she said, "Good evening, sire. Good evening, Fulk." He said, "You know my name?" She said, "Oh, well, of course I know your name. You are a famous knight." "I think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he said. "You must marry me. You must come with me to my castle. I must have you in my life." And she smiled. "I will come with you and I will marry you," she said, "but there will be 3 conditions. And the first condition is that you will never again watch me bathing. And the second condition is you won't make me set foot in your church because I don't like churches. And the third condition is that 1 day a month you will let me alone to do what I choose and go wherever I please, and you will not follow me and you will not question me, and you will just let it be." And Fulk was so dazed with love and the whole experience that he just agreed. He didn't think too much about it. And now she said, "Turn your back so I can get dressed, and then I will come with you." So he turned his back, and before he knew it, she had leapt onto the back of his horse, and the 2 of them rode to his castle, where, after a few days, they married, not in a church, in the castle itself. And they were very happy together. They loved each other very much. She gave him children. Now, there are some versions of the story which say these children all had some dreadful defect, that one was born with 1 tooth and only ever had 1 tooth, that one was born hairy, and another one was born with the wrong number of arms. But I prefer to think that as we know that Fulk's real son was the most handsome man in Europe, I think they were beautiful children. And everything was going very well, and the country was prospering under this wonderful reign of the 2 together. But Fulk's mother was the one who got very concerned about her daughter-in-law, and she began to whisper little drops of poisonous suspicion into Fulk's brain about, "How do you know they're your children? Where does she go on that 1 day a month when you let her go? Have you ever wondered where she's going? Is she maybe meeting some other lover?" And although Fulk tried to deny it, after a while it began to fester in him and grow inside him. So he began to feel he had to find out the truth of it. Where was she going? And so one day he left the castle and he followed her. And he saw her drawing close to the forest. And he got off his horse and he walked quietly. And there indeed she was, bathing in the pond, naked and beautiful as she'd been before. And she looked at him, and this time she let out the most dreadful scream of betrayal and anger and hurt. And she rose up out of the water, and as she rose out of the water he saw that the lower half of her body was that of a dragon. And as her arms raised out of anger, they turned into the great wings of the dragon, and they beat the air, and she rose high above the forest. She circled the forest and the castle 3 times and disappeared. And they say that on the coat of arms of the Lusignan family, which is one of the many descendants, you can see the castle, and above it the dragon circling the castle. And they say the lady's name was Melusine. And they say that the many descendants, because Henry II and Eleanor had many children and they married into the royal families, and so that's why they were called the Devil's Brood, the Plantagenets, because of the blood of Melusine. However hard you look in the real genealogical tables, you will not find Melusine mentioned. There are other wives for Fulk d'Anjou. And so that is the story of Melusine. And as you can see, it's very important that if you make a promise to a young woman, you really ought to keep it.
And also, should you ever see an exquisitely beautiful woman, be careful, because she might be loitering with intent.